All right, welcome everyone. We're excited to be with you this morning for another coffee chat with mayoral candidate Christopher Dahl. On behalf of Arts Build and Arts Forward, we welcome you. As you know, Arts Build's mission is to build a stronger community through the arts, and we do that by providing grants and funding to arts organizations, artists, and arts efforts throughout the city and the county, actually. We do lots of leadership programs for the arts, and we also serve lots of young people with opportunities for arts exposure and arts education, um, as well as arts advocacy, which we're doing today. I do want to thank everyone who contributed to Arts Build's annual fund, which ended in December. And you can find out more about Arts Build on artsbuild.com on the web. And thank you, Monica and Arts Forward, for being a great partner and also in helping us to put on these mayoral chats so we can learn more about the candidates who are running. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica, who will introduce our host and our guest, and you can take it from there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Monica Kinsey with the Arts Forward of Chattanooga. It's a collective of 18 arts organizations. We work alongside Arts Build on providing shared resources such as HR, legal, marketing, awareness of the arts in the community, as well as advocacy of the arts in our community. The arts contribute over $172 million to our local economy, and we feel that it is important that our arts community is engaged in their local elections. Simply put, artists create, contribute, and vote. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest mayoral candidate today, Mr. Christopher Dahl, and our moderator, Marcus Ellsworth. I will let each of you share a little more about yourselves and their organizations as we kick this off. Marcus, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Monica. I'm Marcus Ellsworth. I am a spoken word artist and activist who's been working in the Chattanooga area for about 20 years. I worked with Barking Legs Theater and a number of other organizations in the area, and really actually quite pleased that I was asked to be a moderator for today's discussion. And with that, Christopher, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Christopher Dahl. I've been an activist in the community for like the last about 4 years, just outspoken about like fraud, waste, and abuse of tax dollars that I see that goes on in the city and the county. And one of the reasons why I do it is in hoping to see if we can get rid of the fraud, waste, and abuse. Maybe it would free up funds for other projects in the community, like the arts and money for rec centers. I'd like to see those, be multimedia centers where people can come and do art and so forth throughout the day, even into the nighttime. And I'd like to say appreciate hosting this forum as well. I like this opportunity to be able to reach out to more people.
Well, thank you, Chris. And to get us started, so we can know a little bit more about you and your connections to the art. What is your personal background and experience in the arts?
Well, I've dabbled in the arts myself. I like to draw sometimes in my spare time. My mom likes to paint. Her significant other is in a band. At one time, I actually did a promotion company with my mom here local called Rock U Promotions, where we were actually trying to get local bands and even outside bands in here to the music scene. I think a lot of times too, when we hear arts, a lot of people don't realize that arts can expand to music, theatrical, and other aspects. So, I think a lot of people, when they hear arts, they just think about painting and so forth. But, there's more aspects to art than what people realize.
Mm-hmm. And as far as your platform, are there any new arts related policies or programming that you would bring to the city that you think are really important for our artistic growth?
Well, I've actually been looking over, how the city has its arts set up, and I think that it needs a sort of like a reorganization. I think it's time for the whole city to go under reorganization. We've have a lot of new offices that have been created, and it seems like we have all these extra layers. And if we pulled back some of those, maybe it would create funding for other places as well. And those people who are working for those boards or those new offices that have been created actually could work where they could be utilized better by, peeling back the layers. I think seeing an art council type setup here in the city would be a little bit better, and then that they could work with what I would call a neighborhood resource office or organization that would be through the Economic and Community Development Center. And what that would do is it would tie the Arts Council in with the community. And so I know a lot of the times we have a lot of programs set up, but that never reaches the community as a whole. And that's why I also mentioned about the rec centers, seeing those transformed into a multimedia center to where people could go there throughout the day, do artwork, theater work, music if they wanted to, see it expanded more. Because I think giving more people an outlet for things to do also would help as well with some of the issues that we have in the community, because we all know what they say about idle hands.
Mm-hmm. And could you possibly expand a little bit on the idea of how arts can help impact issues like poverty, crime, concerns about youth and education? How do you see the city's potential support of the arts affecting those issues?
Well, just for one, it can get kids off the streets, get people involved with something, give them a purpose. A lot of times that's all that we're looking for is a purpose in life. And so when you're out there not knowing what you want to be, or not feeling like you're wanted, or having anybody feel, you have that need, it sort of creates this void, and then you turn to doing other things like, maybe joining a gang to feel like you're wanted and so forth. So maybe in my point of view, in my eyes, art, like even music, because, they've taken music out of a lot of schools here. Or the music programs in schools have fallen apart. So to me, having those type of outlets actually can benefit in the long run. Keep just having outlets for people having things to do, having more choices as well. And I think that's why the city should support the arts a little bit more. One thing I was looking at too is the way the grant funding is allocated out as well. It seems like it's a little discriminatory, and that comes from maybe the federal level a little bit too. And so maybe things need to change there about how the funding is even put out. But I think arts is a good thing, just to give people more of an outlet. Even I know people who have done artistic work for emotional outlets, things like that. So it's very important.
Okay. And you touched on like equity in the arts. Do you have any ideas about how we can make our arts and culture community more equitable along the lines of race, and particularly race in Chattanooga? We know that the Black community often feels like pushed to the side and underrepresented in the arts. Do you have any ideas of how we can have our public arts programs more representative of the people of Chattanooga?
That's one of the reasons why I think that we need a neighborhood resource office, so that way these type of programs can reach the community more and more people can be involved, because a lot of times too, the narrative here in the city is local artists get cut out as well. Local musicians, local artists who paint and draw, and even some of the theater. I mean, to me, the theatrical part of Chattanooga sort of is monopolized. I'd like to see that branched out a little bit more as well. And to touch on the discrimination aspect, I think with the way the grant process is and the bidding, the way the funding process needs to maybe be revamped, because a lot of times, like I said, on the federal level, I noticed that they want to give grants more to Native American artists and African American artists, but how about the Asian artist or the Caucasian artist? So what we need to do is maybe push for funding across the board. And that's why I suggested an art council too, because maybe the city can hire somebody through the art council to lobby at a state level or a federal level.
Hmm. And one of the questions that we had submitted, I think, is a pretty hefty question, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Um, Gentrification is affecting the Black community in devastating ways. How would you ensure that the culture of the Black community is preserved as Chattanooga develops?
See, that's a hard question because I've been trying to help aid in the preservation of like Lincoln Park and other aspects, because I run a history site called Chattanooga Has History as well. So history is sort of important to me, and the culture of the city as well. And it seems like that's been eroded over the last maybe 15 years, where we've lost some of what made us Chattanooga. I mean, you see it with the overdevelopment that's going on as well. Look at what happened to Jefferson Heights area,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still developing out that area. And to me, they could have utilized the aspect of that neighborhood, and then from there you could have had an art economy created based on the culture of that area, instead of seems a lot of times we just get certain type of art that is spent on by certain artists. I don't know if that's because these artists have buddied up with the mayor or something, but it seems like sometimes that does happen here as well. So that right there, preserving the culture through art is really important. I think Churchville, could be a next area for that as well. We don't see no art about all the churches that were once in Churchville. That's and things like that. I know they've tried to do some art projects out there in East Chattanooga to revitalize that area as well. And I think that's important because, I mean, we have viaducts that people want to paint, like out in St. Elmo and in East Chattanooga and things. And I think that should be, what's the word I'm looking for? I think people should promote that. That should be
Mm-hmm.
promoted, where you want to do art in the community, and that should be promoted.
And you touched on like an art economy for communities like that. How do you think the city's support of the arts sector can be leveraged to spur economic growth?
I think that the art economy, I see that if things like if an art council was created and the city could organize it a little bit better, I could see the art economy, or what I call art economy, economy based on theater, uh, music, and other forms of art. I think that can make up about 10 to 15% of Chattanooga's economy if ran right. And so I see a future where Chattanooga could build on what it's trying to build upon, but do it in a better fashion. Because also, I've talked to a lot of people who do music, and they say that they feel like a little bit the city wants a certain type of genre in music, and so they want to try to branch out. And I think Chattanooga needs to promote all of its music, because for many years we've had a rap culture scene that has gone unheard for a long time, where people feel like they have to move out to make it, and that should never happen as well.
Yeah, I know of several artists who've moved out of the Chattanooga area specifically for reasons like that. So thank you for addressing that. Um, let's see, where was I? Sorry, I'm going through my list of questions.
I mean, I even know a Chattanooga artist who had a studio on Dodge Avenue in City Council, and the city attacked him to the point where they had police in his parking lot all the time and so forth. And see that's something that we need to try to pull away from doing as a city. Trying to stifle out people creativity as well, because that all that does is, I mean, if somebody did that to me, it would turn me into wanting to do maybe some retaliatory action, which wouldn't be on the good side. It might make me want to go out in the neighborhood and tear it up a bit because I'm upset.
Well, and in your platform, you do talk about divesting from policing in particular and coming in and putting that money back into the community in different ways. How would art figure into that reinvestment in communities?
Well, that like I said, one of the big things I would divest from is putting that money into the neighborhood centers that we have, and turning those into multimedia centers, the recreational centers, instead of having them just see them as rec centers, having them as what I call multimedia centers, where people can go out throughout the day. Maybe you have an artist come to each center and teach people how to paint, or somebody who plays guitar teaching people how to play guitar and so forth. Where they have music studios in each of one of them, a nice library, and so forth. I mean, a lot of people. I think we have a lot of artists that write, just want to write poems and so forth, and that's not promoted here either. And I think it's time for Chattanooga to promote the arts across the spectrum, because we have a lot of that talent here that, like you said, feels the need to move away in order to move forward in their life. And that's a shame.
And with this vision of engaging the rec centers and the YFD centers more, I know that this is both personally and just with people that I know in the arts community, there have been attempts to bring more art into these centers, but there's problems that include scheduling, where the centers are not available at times, sometimes just closed on weekends when community could actually engage them. And then getting into those centers to build programming has proven to be quite difficult. Do you have any ideas of how to, one, expand the hours of use for the YFD centers, and also to help us to bring in more programming for those who want to help support that?
Well, actually, I do. My main thing, like I said, is the reorganize the whole city. So one of my main issues with the Parks and Rec department is I want to try to change them into a commission style form, which would allow more people to engage in meetings as well. So they would have to hold public meetings like the city council does, and the county commission, which would allow people to address these issues, allow more public participation. I do think that they need to be open longer. I know when I was a kid at one time, they had a lot of after-hour programs, and the city's done away with a lot of that as well. I think it's time too, once it's reorganized into a commission style, that they could work with the school board as well to try to provide some after hours care through the rec centers, which would provide a little bit more funding to do some of these things too. So we have to look to reorganization, and then working or partnering up to obtain new funding, but do it in a way that is open to the public as well and accountable, because a lot of times a lot of funding does go into the rec centers, but there's no accountability for it either.
Mm-hmm. And on that, what steps would you take to make sure that processes like that are more transparent and visible to the public? Because we know that the Burke administration very early on ran on the idea of transparency in government, and there has been a lot of criticism about how effective that's been. What would you do to make that process more accessible and visible?
Well, first thing I would do is look to changing the speaking rules at city council, because right there, you can only speak twice in 30 days. That shows you that there isn't no true transparency or accountability when they don't want public participation. And then I've been looking into, one thing I would create is an office of accountability. It'd probably be the only office that I would create. And their sole purpose would be to work with the city auditor and human resources and other departments to make sure that policies are followed. And then that also, when people call in about fraud, waste, and abuse of tax dollars, that those complaints aren't just shrugged off, because a lot of times you call now, it goes through the city's audit department, and those issues are just shrugged off. And I know that there's been issues with funding that's been reported to them, and other issues with policy and ethics that has been reported, and it all goes unwarranted. And I think some of that is because there is no way to enforce policy maybe. And then like with the city's human resource policy, it's pretty vague. And so it needs to be redefined. So that way, with more of a definition to things, people can be held accountable to that policy.
Thank you. I want to kind of backtrack a little bit to the concept of accessibility in the arts and in the city as a whole. I have two questions here that are similar. I'm going to try to consolidate them. If you're elected mayor, will you support the Mayor's Council on Disability in efforts to facilitate inclusion and awareness through engagement within City Hall departments and the disabled citizens? And then the second question that ties into that, I believe, is if elected, how would you change the familiar narrative of segregation and dismissal of disabled culture in government, safe housing, and the arts?
You see, that's a big problem that I've been outspoken about here in the city, is that the city doesn't seem to be ADA compliant. We have a lot of even sidewalks that aren't compliant. The housing authority doesn't want to be ADA compliant in some of their housing as well. And that's concerning because, as a city, we don't, to me, I see that as a form of discrimination. As a city, we don't need to discriminate at all. And if you're not willing to address these issues and just let them prolong like we have, it continues this cycle that we have. So we need to break this cycle and get out of that. I believe that everybody should be included. And the fact that people that have disabilities aren't, because I know some people who are autistic and want to participate, but sort of feel shunned away. And then I know some people who have mobility issues that can't really participate because some of the places where the meetings are held, they can't actually access and so forth. So there's accessibility issues as well that need to be addressed. And like I said, I see that as discrimination, and I think the city just needs to cut all that out and find ways to cut it out.
And do you have any ideas of how possibly the arts could be used to raise awareness or even to directly address these issues for the disabled community specifically?
Well, I know at one time, they would use arts to run campaigns, do art projects, and people would be awarded, like kids could draw pictures and be awarded a small grant, and then they would put it on a campaign through, put it on the buses for advertising and stuff to make people aware of certain issues. And I think that could be done again. I know at one time, I think Erlanger did that a lot. And I think that should be promoted again because, promoting the arts through any way possible, and just finding ways to fund it is on an economic point of view is a way to sustain it, because a lot of times people don't realize how much money actually goes into producing art either, or how much time somebody has to spend, or how much time it takes one person. I mean, if you're an artist and you're OCD, it could take you 2 or 3 months to finish a picture because, every time you look at it, there could be something wrong or that you want to add or change. So people, that we need to find other ways to come up with funding, creative ways, ways that we don't really hear people talk about as well. And, that could be a way right there.
And then speaking of funding, funding and programming, I have a question here for the city is currently working towards the design phase for a new modern regional skate park. What are your thoughts on this project, and how do you think you would approach funding parks and recreation in general?
Well, with the skate park, I was actually thrown off because when that originally was constructed, the city turned down building it out of concrete, like how they want to propose to build it now. And at that time too, a group of people wanted to have it in a centralized location, but the city wanted to put it down there by Tennessee Pavilion because I think they were trying to build something down there. But I think it's important. My son likes to skateboard. I skateboarded as a teenager. I don't get on it much anymore, and I know friends who do as well. And people don't realize, when we hear about skateboarding, people think it's just one side demographic sport, but it's not. A lot of people like to skate, and not just skateboard, but skate in general. So I think it's important for the city to invest in something like that. I was sort of thrown back when they didn't invest in the concrete park because of the maintenance aspect as well. And then the city sort of tried to turn it into a money-making investment, and that's when it started to sort of fall apart. And see, I don't think things like that should be, the city should try to make money off of things because it's a government, it's not a business. And the government's never in the business to make money because, they right off the rip, people have to understand that when they take in taxes and the government spends it, anybody could see that as fraud, waste, or abuse if they don't like the way it's spent. So the government has to spend that money across the board or reciprocate it, in which we don't see that today. But I've been an advocate for the skate park. I think it needs a new one. Like I said, I wish they would have built it out of concrete like the group suggested back in, I think it was 2012 or maybe before that. I forget when. It was so long ago. And but the city chose to do it how they wanted to do it, and now we have a need for a new one because they've had to spend so much money upkeeping the one we do have. So yeah, I would support that. I think it needs to be maybe in a more centralized location though, even from where it's being proposed, because it's being proposed by I think Chat State. And if you don't go to that school, and this is from experience, and you try to go back in the parking lots and that, the security there might harass you a bit. So I think we need to look at maybe putting it somewhere else, but I would support it fully, even like I said, and building it out of concrete and making it to where it would be a long lasting skate park.
Mm-hmm. And on the subject of development like that, these quality of life improvements across Chattanooga, what areas of the city do you think could benefit the most from development that highlights arts and public engagement and even like outdoor activities?
To be honest, I think all the city could. I mean, a lot of people just, when they hear Chattanooga, they just think about it being maybe the downtown area or the North Shore or St. Elmo or the suburb, anything to the ridge. They don't realize that there's parts of the city that's north of Red Bank, parts of the city that's almost all the way to Saudi Daisy. We have Lookout Valley as well. And I believe that there's people in every community that wants to do artwork and, have their arts promoted. And so, I see a future where, if we had an organized park and rec organization where each rec center could maybe on the weekends host community gatherings where bands from that community could play for the residents there. Artists could show off their work, even do theater work at the rec centers where people could go in their community and put on a show for their community, or even people outside could come to that rec center to watch that show, and so forth. So I think that the rec centers, by strengthening them, it could create a better and more stronger art community here than we already have. And it would be able to help promote the arts as well, because it would give an outlet for these artists to, show their work or show their music and then let people know how to contact them, and maybe, get booked for a show or sell their art through these events that are put on for the community. And that's, to me, how government should work. It shouldn't charge the community to do those things, because we've already paid for them through our taxes. So we should help promote the people in the community.
Thank you. And speaking of like engaging artists and audiences, right now, in the height of a pandemic, it's becoming more and more difficult for artists to put their work out there and to engage audiences. For now, while we're still in this state of where we can't have big concerts or art gallery openings, um, do you have any ideas of how the city can support virtual engagement for artists and their audiences?
Well, I think the city, I know the city helps fund, I think, the public television station. And I would like to see more shows through that, sort of like maybe, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Austin City Limits, that show, because I think I don't know if it's still on the air. And I think they did a show sort of like that at Mammoth Cave here in Tennessee as well. And I think maybe Chattanooga should look at doing something like that through its public television station. And then that way local artists could have a scene promoted to the music scene promoted to promote their music, as well as maybe looking at, since the restaurants really can't have that many people, maybe looking at maybe setting up a TV screen and doing a virtual show at a restaurant as well. I know nobody's thought about or even talked about that idea yet. Maybe that's something that maybe somebody can even create a business off of, to help promote the local artist, where they set up speakers and a television screen and then broadcast them through that restaurant. But with the pandemic and that, we need to look at different things like that, and try to come up with more ideas of how to promote the local scene. I mean, even maybe doing auctions on the public television station for artwork as well, or having people say, I can play an event for a day and hold an auction for their band, to have them come play at an event and try to raise money that way as well. Do like a telethon and so forth.
Thank you. And then looking a little bit further into the future, when we start getting to the point now that vaccines are rolling out and there's speculations that within a year, maybe longer, we can start gathering in public again. Do you have any plans for how to make sure that as places do begin to reopen, as events start to happen again, to make sure that that it's done safely for everyone in Chattanooga?
Well, I know OSHA has put guidelines up, and as a as a representative, all that we can do is promote like the OSHA guidelines and so forth, and set that good example. Businesses should follow that as well, and what the CDC has in place. But the businesses are governed by, to me, they're governed by other regulations than just city ordinances. And so, if we already have provisions in place, there's no need for a mayor to make extra laws, but there's a need for the mayor to set that good example, And so I believe that with the virus and the issues that have arisen, like with the mask mandate and so forth, that the mayor has to take into consideration people's civil liberties, and not infringe on them as well.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, lost track of my questions. One moment.
And I think because I follow the OSHA, been following what OSHA has put out for their guidelines, and with the sanitizing your hands or washing your hands and so forth. And as I believe as any new issues arise, and we had to take any new provisions, that they would actually have those in place through OSHA.
And with that, how would you work with the county and the state to make sure that you're setting that example in Chattanooga?
Well, with the state, it's funny because the governor, instead of the state has a provision in place that they had put in place, I think in 1912 when the yellow fever had broken out, that the governor could have declared using that instead of declaring us a state of emergency, which that would have put different provisions in place to deal with this virus. And I think that the governor should have done his due diligence and realized that we had these type of things on the book. I don't think they actually know about laws that they have made in the past, or I don't think hardly anybody who gets into office dust off the charters or so forth and actually make sure that they have any provisions in place before they make new ones. And so I think that we need to start doing due diligence in that case as well. The governor, in my opinion, did a bad job. He really has. And I don't want to throw him under the bus too much, but he could have handled this a lot better to where it wouldn't have put a strain on the economy like it did. Because I don't know if you guys had noticed, when this hit, Chattanooga's economy was about to hit a boom, and it put a stop to that.
And how would you suggest it bolstering our local economy?
Well, now, like I have a few different ideas to do that. Like I said, I want to build on the arts economy. I want to establish something called a giving economy, which there's been TED Talks based on that, where it's a economy based on donations and so forth, and that and a few other ideas to not only put an influx of funding into the city's economy, but also find ways to generate that influx, and also sort of be able to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Chattanooga, it used to be called Visitor Bureau, but it's now Tourist Company. They do a lot of marketing for the city, and the city pays them to do that marketing. They're actually a branch of the city and the county. And that would allow to create like an art economy and a giving economy that would allow them to market that to the international economy, which could pull in not only more people, but more awareness of Chattanooga in general. And I think raising more awareness of what our city has to offer would be able to generate more revenue, maybe more tourist revenue as well. I know, for example, the Incline Railway on a good weekend during the summer can make $25,000 in one day.
Oh. Well, thank you. And with that, Chris, I'm going to throw it back to Monica to see if we have any questions that have been submitted through the viewers.
We have 3 questions that have been submitted, so we can get into those unless you have an additional question that you want to ask before we do.
No, actually, I think Christopher has covered all the ground I was looking for.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, so the first question we will ask is, you mentioned, Christopher, Mr. Dahl, you mentioned increasing the hours of the rec centers. Currently, the 5 super centers are open from 9 to 8 p.m., 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, Fridays from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The remaining 14 centers are open 11:30 to 8, Monday through Thursday, Fridays from 10 to 6, and Saturdays from 10 to 6. What hours would you like to see the centers open? Know that the centers can be open earlier and later upon request.
Well, I've actually been looking at and talking to people in the community about trying to see if some of these centers can't be 24 hours. Um, I know if you could make them into what I could envision them, you'd have even a workout space in these gyms as well, which would allow that. Um, I don't know if the city could charge a fee because to me fees are taxes, and the city's not shouldn't be in the business of generating revenue. And a lot of these rec centers are already funded through our taxes, so we shouldn't be double billed for them. But I think I can see them going on to at least 10, maybe 11 o'clock as well, especially if you could get aftercare programs there. We have to take into consideration too that we have people now with Amazon and other businesses who work third shift jobs. So, maybe provide things for their kids during third shift as well, if they want that outlet too. And just for people who are night owls to have an outlet, because I know people who rather do things during the night or do things better at night as well. So we have to look into expanding that, because with the way that just the culture is moving as well, having just to see our day as a 9 to 5 or defining what our day is, to me doesn't make sense either. Some people's day isn't a 9 to 5. Some people's day is a 11 to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Especially in the arts. In the arts, there's a lot of arts and events and things that happen, late at night. And I have to say, as a product of a single mother, I went to 24-hour daycare when she had to work. So, it's definitely something that I think could help our community. So,
yeah, and see, we hear people wanting the city to get back into education. And I think that the education, the city washed their hands from it legally, but that's where I see the city being able to pick up the slack is through Head Start. A lot of people don't realize right now, as it sits, the city's Head Start program is one of the programs that has the most city credit cards out. And a lot of that spending on those credit cards go unaccounted for. Or we have people who, for example, go and eat lunch every day. And this isn't through the Head Start program, but this is just a city employee who has a credit card going to eat lunch every day on the city credit card. So we need to, sort of cap that as well, and sort of scrutinize that. But I see the city aiding in education through Head Start program or daycare, which if it's set up right, you bring in independent businesses who use the rec centers, which they would maybe pay a small monthly fee, because I know the city makes deals with a lot of places for like $1 leasing, but maybe $30 a month or something. But that money could go back into the rec center, whatever money they charge for leasing a little room out to provide that daycare. And then it would also allow maybe somebody from the community local to establish a business in their community as well.
Okay, great answer. Next, how would you integrate the arts as a part of our city's response to COVID recovery?
I think that that could be a real good outlet, especially with people who are retired. I wouldn't say elderly, because we have people who are not elderly who are retired as well in the city. So if anybody who's retired, they need an outlet. Younger people, we have a lot of schools that aren't in right now, and I'm wondering what the younger kids are doing with their school being out or having to be cooped up in their house all day. And if the rec centers were truly a recreational center, a multimedia center, then that could provide the outlet that would be needed, and arts could fill some of that void. Like I said, we could provide art classes, and that right there alone, providing an art class through the rec center would be promoting a local artist who wants to get involved in their community too.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And lastly, why should the people who make up the local arts and culture sector vote for you?
Well, I'm not going to tell them, who to vote for. I always give people the choice. I'm not going to. I'll ask them to consider me. And just the reason I would say is because I'm a person who has stood up about fraud, waste, and abuse, and anything that I stand up against or talk out about, I'm committed to doing so. I don't stop. I'm sort of stubborn when it comes to that, and I want to fight for equality across the board in the city. We hear a lot of people running, but they don't talk about all the discrimination. I see the discrimination going on across the spectrum in the city. That needs to be addressed. We have a lot of issues with our infrastructure that needs to be addressed, that gets overlooked. and when you hear people talking about infrastructure, their main focus is the sewer, but they got to realize we have streets that don't even meet federal regulations for width size. We have a lot of homes that have been built in communities where they've never had parking, and so the on-street parking has become a bigger issue as well. Even in my area in Highland Park, where the road sizes are pretty wide, but there's been no upgrades to address that issue, and so you have a lot of on-street parking all across the city. And I think the city needs to start addressing those issues as well when it pertains to infrastructure, like cutting in parking spaces for the residents and so forth. Then, just watching the spending in general, I've been a big advocate about making sure that the city isn't misspending. And when they do, I sort of call them out for it, even if it's like $5,000 out of place, because that's $5,000 that could go to fund something else. $5,000 that could go towards affordable housing or towards micro grant programs. And you see, that's something that I've looked into as well, is creating a micro grant program through the Office of Neighborhood Resource Office or organization, which if people want to know more about that, the example that I got from is it's the Neighborhood Resource Organization that was based in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I got to talk to a person who created that, and he ended up that department that organization has been taken over by the Economic and Community Development Office in Erie, Pennsylvania. So they've incorporated it into their government to make it work better. And that's just what I wanted. I just want to see our tax dollars be spent across the spectrum, and not just be allocated in one area. I want to see all of Chattanooga, better and built up, instead of just like, say, the downtown area invested in, or just the East Chattanooga area invested in. I'd like to see, Brainerd area invested in. I know they have investments poised for Rossville Boulevard, and they're rezoning all that area as we speak. So, the ball is in motion. And the question is everybody going to be involved in this? And I believe that without more transparency and accountability, that we're looking to a future that's going to cut a lot of people out. And so that's why I decided to run. I actually had two younger gentlemen. One of them was the age of 16, who asked me if I was going to run for mayor. And at the time I was considering it, but I wasn't really dedicated. And after speaking to these two young gentlemen, that's when I just put the ball in motion and decided I was going to run.
Well, thank you. I want to thank everyone here today for taking the time to participate this morning. I would like to remind everyone that we have more of these events scheduled as we get closer to Election Day. This Friday, we have Andrew McLaren at 12 o'clock. And then the following Friday on the 22nd, we have Ryan Love at 12 o'clock. Marcus, do you have any announcements that you'd like to share with the attendees?
Shameless plug. I'm hosting some virtual concerts with in conjunction with Soundcore. Our next one is actually tomorrow. We're doing a lunch hour concert with Courtney Holder, and just invite folks to join us there, and just make sure you're still supporting artists locally who are doing things online and virtually. It's really the only way we're going to keep our art scene alive right now.
Thank you, and thank you for your role in that and helping us keep the art scene alive. James, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you. And Marcus, if you want to put the link to that in the chat, that way everybody can grab it so they could attend. I just want to thank everyone for participating. Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Thank you, Monica and Marcus, for hosting and moderating. I did want to remind everyone that ArtsBuild has opened up our application again for the Artist Works grants. And as you know, those are grants from $2,500 to $75,000 that are focused on promoting and helping the arts locally in Chattanooga recover. You can apply for those at artsbuild.com. Also today, we are sharing a Persist and Prosper workshop that was organized by the Tennessee Arts Commission. And this is about supporting artists through COVID and into recovery. That's today at 4 o'clock. Thursday, I don't know what day it is, so let's just say Thursday, we're supporting an SBA workshop on COVID recovery, focused specifically on grants for venues and performance spaces and organizations that work with audiences. And that's going to be Thursday at 3 o'clock. And then as always, you can check out our website or our Facebook page about any of our upcoming workshops for organizations on HR topics, social media, grant writing, and fundraising. All of that is on our ArtsBuild Facebook page as well as our ArtsBuild website. So I want to thank everyone today again for just helping to reinforce that the arts are essential. They've been essential in building our city. They will also be essential in rebuilding our economy as we go into recovery and recover from COVID. So thank you all very much, and we will see you at some of our upcoming events and our upcoming candidate conversations. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate having me. And if anybody needs to get in touch with me, because I like to ramble on a little bit, they can contact me at 423-693-4731. And I love to talk about politics and what's going on in the city.
Thank you. So we'll make sure we'll be sharing this later today on our YouTube page too, Chris, if you want to grab it and share it. Okay.
All right. Appreciate it. And you guys have a great rest of the day.
You too.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
y'all.
Bye.